All right, I'm going to bring you a case this week that's going to be tied a little bit into Christmas. We're going to talk about a victim who went missing on Christmas Eve. And yes, this is a high-profile case. This is a case you've probably heard about recently in the news. The person that was convicted was resentenced, and that was just a couple of years ago. But the case I'm going to bring you today is Laci Peterson, and this starts way back in 2002 on Christmas Eve. Now, there's a couple of players that play in this case. So obviously there's Laci Peterson. She was pregnant at the time, and it was stated that they were going to name the new baby Connor Peterson. Her husband, Scott Peterson, who was convicted and is currently serving time in jail for this crime. And then a mistress, which was Amber Fry. So a couple of things that I want to hit real fast is that there's a lot of information in this case. Much like many of the videos that I brought you, I'm going to try to keep it to 8, 9, 10 minutes. And we'll try to get as much information on the timeline as possible. But I do encourage you, go check out the information on this case. There's a lot of information that is out there, especially on where the murders take place or where they find the bodies, things like that. And it is pretty interesting. The more you deep dive into this, the more you start thinking how evil people can be, specifically in this case, Scott Peterson. So let's jump right into it. So really what happens is in October of that year of 2002, Scott Peterson goes out for work and he meets up with a friend named Sean. And at that time, I'm not sure if Sean knew that he was married. I'm assuming not. But she basically says, hey, I want to introduce you to one of my friends, and that would be Amber Fry. Scott doesn't do anything with it. Essentially, I'd say a couple of weeks pass. He gets a message from Sean that says, hey, I would really like you to meet Amber. And still nothing happens, but they end up having a phone call. Later on, they meet up at a bar in Fresno. Scott Peterson has a hotel room. They spend all night together, essentially, end up having fun. They go back to his hotel room. Fast forward to December, and all of a sudden, Scott is living a double life, essentially. He is doing some things with Amber, showing up unexpectedly, taking them out to picnics, that kind of stuff, picking up her child, and just really living that double lifestyle, right? At that time, Amber didn't know that he was married, and he didn't say anything about being married. And even Sean, I don't think, knew that he was married, because at some point she finds out and says that she's going to tell Amber if Scott doesn't. Scott ends up having a conversation with Amber, and this all happened prior to Laci going missing, and basically says that his marriage is over, right? So pretty typical up to that point. Nothing bad has happened. So now Christmas Eve happens and Laci goes missing. She's 8 months pregnant. So essentially Connor goes missing as well, right? And pretty crazy stuff. Scott reports it. Nothing super crazy happens for a day or two. I think it was Christmas or the day after Christmas, Amber sees this on the news that Laci Peterson had went missing. At this point, Scott hadn't said anything about Amber. Even when he was questioned, no mention of having a mistress. Now, he does have a couple of phone calls with Amber throughout. I don't know what those phone calls entail, but at some point, Amber decides that she's going to go to the Modesto police and cooperate with them because, one, now she knows that he was married. She also suspects that he had something to do with the murders. Amber goes ahead and takes a polygraph test. She passes her polygraph test, spends some time with Scott, trying to encourage him to take a polygraph test himself. He agrees to do it. Once he shows up, he decides not to do it for whatever reason, and Amber decides that she's going to do some recordings on their phone calls to move forward and to really continue to help with the investigation. Okay. A lot of communications in between that time, I'd say from December to April, most of them taking place in January and February. But if we fast forward to April 13th of 2003, Connor's body was found in San Francisco Bay. One day later, on April 14th, Laci Peterson's body was found very badly decomposed, but found all the same on April 14th. Now, 4 days later, on April 18th, Scott Peterson was arrested, and a bond was set for the murder of Laci and Connor Peterson. Okay. Now, a lot of stuff happened in between. Obviously, a lot of evidence was coming forward, and Scott had said that he had went out fishing that day, which was kind of a weird thing. I think that ends up what gets him in the end, but basically he did say that he was out on the water. Now, he said he had nothing to do with his essentially estranged wife now, her murder, or the murder of his unborn child. But throughout the investigation, there was some things that were thrown out there. At one point, even the defense of a satanic cult may have gotten Laci. So they were throwing out some crazy stuff to try to bring doubt to the jury that something else could have happened. But the jury just wasn't buying it, right? So I'm not going to get too far into the case because, again, I want to keep this video to 8 or 9 minutes. But here's what I'll tell you, just a quick recap of where we've gotten so far, right? So Scott Peterson's married, goes to a convention or whatever the case might be, through a friend, meets a new girl, and ends up liking this girl, spends some time with her. In a short period of time, I'd say less than 30 days, makes a decision that he has to get rid of his wife. He ends up getting rid of his wife and his unborn child, and then ends up getting arrested for it on April 18th after they find the body of both Connor and Laci on April 13th and 14th. So that's basically what's happened so far. A couple of details that came out after that was that it looked like both of the bodies had been placed and that they had been severely decomposed, but they couldn't really determine if that was the case or not. Now, for Connor's body, they could. They said that that was placed where they found it, but with Laci's body, they said that the body could have been entered in the bay somewhere else and washed up ashore. So they really couldn't nail that one down, but it was very suspect of how that happened and where were the bodies at before that happened. So were they exhumed, were they placed somewhere, whatever the case might be, and ended up where they ended up. Ultimately, Scott Peterson ends up being convicted for this murder, as he should have been. I do want to state in this one that I truly believe that Amber Frey didn't know that he was married. If you look at the timeline and her actions as a human being as she's finding this information out, she was pivotal in the case against Scott Peterson. She had also said when they were doing the resentencing, or if they were going to throw out the case based off of jury misconduct, that she would be willing to go back and be a witness again for the prosecution. So this just tells me that she didn't know what was going on, and whatever was going on in Scott Peterson's head, she wasn't privy to. And when she did find out how evil this person was, she was quick to come forward and work with investigators. So nothing against Amber Frey. Unfortunate that she had to be a part of it, but she was pivotal in the case, and she was pivotal in putting Scott Peterson away, which ultimately is what we wanted to see. The one thing that I would say about this whole case is that, you know, yes, it was sad that Laci Peterson died. Yes, it was sad that an unborn child died. But I think what even makes it more sad is that this happened on Christmas Eve. Imagine that you're getting geared up to have a really great Christmas, and however it happened, you end up going missing the day before Christmas Eve. You just vanish, right? In this case, a little bit different than the cases before, they were found, and they were found a few months later. But isn't it pretty crazy that people can be this evil this close to Christmas? So I'm going to leave you with this. Again, if you've made it this far, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button down below. Leave me a comment. Let me know what story you would like to hear. And let me know if you like the live streams as well, because I'm going to continue to do those. And I might change it to one video a week and a couple live streams throughout the week. But I'm going to leave that up to you folks. So whatever the comments say, we're going to adhere to that. And on that, I wish you all a Merry Christmas, and I hope to see you soon.